only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. Last week we had a really interesting episode where Neil took us around what I think he tried to make us not call a hall of choices. However, that's the only way I think I can possibly explain what's happening, is that in alternative realities, when we pass on, there are all sorts of areas, but they're not areas. They just exist. But I suppose it comforts us somehow, being human, that there's a house or a building or something which is a headquarter of something. But I know Neil's at tremendous pains to explain that that's not how it works. It seems to be more like just a place where people feel comfortable to discuss or to be involved in a certain thing, and they are somehow just drawn to that. It's almost an inbuilt knowing in the soul that when you're there, you will receive the information that you feel you need to receive. And of course, as ever, this week I just want to start off with the wonderful piano interpretation that Esther has kindly done for me, based on the lyrics that Neil channeled to me over the course of a few days last week. So this is something that we've put together, and we've managed to combine, as usual, the lyrics and the interpretation that Esther has for the music. I think you'll find it amazing. I think in a way it's probably my favorite piece now. It's more upbeat than previous music. It certainly seems to go extremely well with the words. And you get that sense of choice within the music, which is interesting. Different choices of tone, different choices of rhythm, where the music may go, seems to be conveying, I think, what Neil is trying to say, which is the choices we have to make in life will be the choices we make in death, and that existence is choices. So here it is, but it's called now Better Choices. All choices dominate our lives. Things moving forward and back. Meeting obstacles as we gain what we lack. Our choices form our experience. It is to pass or remain, overtake and exist, define the direction and never be missed. Fragments used, paths not chosen. Choosing our experience, never frozen. Our plan to recognize the best way through. Glimpse the true meaning of why it is so blue. The goal, if we meet an obstacle again, is that no choice is needed 10 out of 10. The perfect harmony of existence appears and is greeted. Know the state of matter, surprises defeated. Emotion, feeling no longer is needed. Perfect peace is achieved and retained. Everything is learned and finally trained. Decide to end the reincarnation line. Our free will, what's yours, what's mine. The next stage, where we do it new this time. As teachers and masters, or choosing to stay. Helping all souls find the true right way. After many more trials as masters of time, ours may be up, our choices decided. Choices to explore can finally be guided through systems of life impossible to grasp, forms we cannot see or imagine or clasp. Beyond that current level of being, new senses are needed. Choose love, and I feel it succeeded. We are graduates, starting another eternity. Still novices, with a brand new fraternity. Well, that was what we're now calling Better Choices. Thanks again for Esther for the wonderful interpretation of my crazy piano channeling from last week. We'll try again this week as well, because already I've got words that I think Neil has passed through, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, there are a few things that I'd like to do. My friend Linda wrote to me yesterday, I think, and actually has asked if I could have a quick chat with Titan, my spiritual guide, and see if I could find some information about two areas that I think she's very interested in. One is starseeds, and the second is light language. Now, I have to say that I'd heard the word starseeds, but had absolutely no idea what that's about. And I've also heard of light language, but again, I don't know anything about it. Now, Linda's told me a little bit about it, and it'll be very interesting to see quite what Titan has to say. As usual, I'm always finding that a couple of days before I do my podcast, something like this happens, and some questions are asked, or somebody writes to me, and must well quickly give a great shout out to all those people who are writing and who seem to be really enjoying the episodes. I mean, the last episode was the most downloaded episode I've done, so we're on a good trajectory. So that's wonderful. So let's, without any further ado, let's see if I can ask Titan to come by, and we'll ask these couple of questions before hopefully we can continue our journey with Neil in the spiritual realms. Okay, so shall we start with starseeds, Titan? What is your understanding of those? She's saying, she's quite mystical in a way, but she's saying, forever forgotten and forever remembered. You are always part of something more. She's saying that we choose to forget in our life just the experiences that we've had, not just in this life, but in other lives and in other dimensions. She's saying that the fundamental mistake that perhaps I'm still making is that we're seeing things in terms of sequential time, and it doesn't exist. But the only way we as humans can understand anything that she's saying to me, and she's saying, well, even that Neil is revealing, is trying to understand it in terms of our framework. We always need to see things in terms of a journey, she says, from A to B, to C to D, she says. But that's not right, because A, B, C, and D have happened, will happen, will have different probabilities of happening. And where she is in her domain, and where we go when we pass, is in this wonderful knowing where we see everything simultaneously, because there is no time apart from the now. And for us, she says, to imagine that our human life is all that's going on is a fallacy, because we are simultaneously experiencing many different realms and many different lives. But for the safety of our mental health, she says, it's very normal for most people not to remember anything except their current life and the memories relating to that. But if people try, people can access that. People can access the past, the future. They can access, she says, different lives and indeed different dimensions. But she says here, this is where it gets really, really complicated. And she said that Neil mentioned this last week, that ultimately you do have a choice when you're not in human form to understand and make choices to live in different dimensions, or to visit them if you would like to. But it's not something you can do she says, in this mode where we are channeling, because it's impossible, completely impossible, to really understand what you're seeing or what's happening to you, because we just don't have the vocabulary to be able to express. She says that obviously so much of what we're going through at the moment is being helped by music and words, which is just adding an extra, she's saying, an extra 10 or 20% to the language that you're receiving. But to actually begin to understand the concept of what, she says, what we call star seeds, you'd have to have the infinite understanding that only comes about when you've left physical life. She's saying that so much has been written about these, what she says are so-called star seeds, and she says that there's plenty that you can read up on it if you want to, and she won't spend hours talking about it. But she says the general idea being, of course, is that there are many different races, many different species on many different planets in many different universes, and somehow there's a relationship between them and us on Earth. And she says that is partly true and it's partly false. There are many people who have reincarnated as human beings, who have been having lives in different species, different entities on different planets, in different dimensions. But it is extremely rare for anyone in a human form to have any recollection of that, and for the very obvious reasons that it could cause she says, like a psychotic breakdown. And she certainly does not recommend that people wandering around as human try to, for instance, she says, laughingly, imagine what it's like to be a Martian. She mentions that although Neil said last week that it was very, very dangerous, and he actually used some stronger language than that for us to be trying to get access to these realms, he certainly has not finished in that. He will be talking to us a bit more about that in later episodes, about other realms and other planets and other species. But it's nothing that he can show me. It'll be just a pure description of what he can see. Okay, well, I'll look forward to that. She's saying, though, for now, the concept of these star seeds is something that a lot of people have been very interested in. But that is just a slight mixture of occult thinking. There is so much history in human experience that tries to explain multidimensionality as if it was something as obvious as species from other planets. And of course, she says you've given them a range of names, and try to explain that they're coming from systems that we have already recognized through astronomy and research. She said, I'm sorry to break this to you, but it's not the case. It's again a perfect example of us as human beings always wanting to put a tag on things, trying to explain what we can see, or if we can't see it, making up a story about what it could be like. She says, please, it's not the case. you could, she say, imagine that there would be a species of life that lives in the constellation of Orion. Well, first of all, the constellation of Orion does not exist. The constellation of Orion only appears as that to us because of the view that we see these stars from Earth. But if we went a few 100 million light years to the left, she said, you would then look at the same area and it would look completely different. And she says, instead of looking like a hunter, it might well look like a whale. So again, she says, constellations and all of this are just ancient things in the human experience that we've made up to describe what we see. But they don't exist any more than the myth and the ideas that we see. People, she said, have put a huge amount of psychic energy into that and can actually allow these things to have a metaphysical force. And they can pray to them as deities, and they can be extremely powerful in terms of the thought power that's gone into them. But she says there's probably a little bit of bad news to all those who are hoping for little green men. She says that really nearly every single example that you will read in the literature on Earth about starseeds is wrong. The systems of life that we have access to are not called any of these names. They would have names that would be incomprehensible to us in languages that we couldn't begin to understand. Species that we could barely look at, let alone communicate with. Some species so many millions of years advanced to us that we would have no way of communicating, and they would see us nothing more than perhaps, she's saying, a low-level life form, like we may see bacteria or a virus. It's just, she says, we are sort of kidding ourselves if we think that these multidimensional, massively advanced, technologically as well as spiritual people would have any great particular interest in talking to us, let alone reincarnating as a human. But that's, she said, that's not always the case. There are most definitely regions of dimensions where there are species of animals, some similar to us, some very different from us, and there is a certain amount of swapping and trading, she says, that takes place in the reincarnational system, and that experience will always be had. And if you want to see it in terms of sequential experience, she says many people that you know on Earth may well have had previous lives in these other dimensions and as other species, but they don't have a lot of ability to access memories from that. Okay, all right then. And what about light language then? What is light language? Okay, she says light language is no different from what we've discussed before in terms of the ability for other forms of communication. Now, in our understanding, we know that there is an electromagnetic system, and it has as part of its frequencies visible light. And she said she'd spoken about this before. And visible light makes up a tiny, tiny fraction of a vast system of energy and frequency. And we can only see or know of a tiny amount of this frequency that we call everything from infrared to gamma rays. But there's so much that exists on other dimensions, way more advanced than this very simple human-based experience of frequency. Light is one way that information can be transferred. She's saying, if you think about your technology now of lasers and the ability to transfer huge amounts of data through fiber optic, she says this is a very similar concept to the idea of light language. It's where light can actually convey communication in a much more advanced way than the words we're using now, she said, or even the emotions that you can feel, or through the hidden messages within music and art. Light language is a way of you describing this almost this telepathic instant knowing that exists amongst multi-dimensional beings. And she says she wants to stress that light is only one part of it, that there are huge amounts of other forms of energy that we cannot see with our eyes, but we can feel or we can interpret through our senses, and also with other senses that we've forgotten about. She's saying that all humans have what some people call a sixth sense, but we have more than that. She said, as humans, you have probably 7 or 8 or 9 senses, but you are out of touch with those senses because they have not been useful to you in your life. But if you'd want to develop those senses, you can do, and then suddenly you can have access to levels of communication which are far nearer to what we call, she says, light language. She says, but we're not going to be able to see that or understand it. And she says, just to give another example, why? She's saying, if you imagine the visible light that you see, if you can see, you will see a color picture of the world around you. These colors are your interpretation of colors, but everybody sees a different color. But everyone agrees that that color that you're seeing, for instance, of the sky during the day is blue. But no two people have the same idea of what blue is. Visible light is something that you can see and is made up of many different colors, but you don't see the individual colors. You just see the wonderful creation of vision. It's not possible for you to see on she's saying left and right of that. You can't see the infrared or the ultraviolet or all the other frequency spectrums, but that's the human condition. But she said, but there are other animals on Earth who can see that and have a very clear visible vision of very high frequencies of radiation that we cannot see as humans. That's exactly what she says. That's what she's talking about in terms of light language. It's a much higher frequency that we cannot physically see or even begin to understand. She says one more thing. She says that's not to say that it is not possible for people to feel certain energy from certain light. And that's long been part of the practice among human cultures. She says that we've talked about the color blue a lot. People talk about colors associated with certain frequencies, such as the chakras. And all of that is completely valid. And the colors emanating from things do represent a frequencies that we can understand and we can communicate with, and we can receive communication back from. And it is a conduit of being able to receive certain forms of energy that have certain interactions with us, either in our physical bodies or in our mind. Okay, Titan, thank you very much for that. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us before I ask Neil to come back and take us further down the roads? She's saying she would like to ask everyone who's listening, if they have a chance at this point, to pause what they're listening to and find a candle. And if they could light that candle, and once they've lit the candle, come back to the podcast. Okay, all right, so I'll stop the podcast now, give everyone a chance to get a candle, light it, and come back. So I have my candles here. So what shall I do about that, Titan? She's saying, have a look into the candle and see what you can see. On the face of it, you can see there's a general light that illuminates everything around. But you can't see that light coming from the flame. You just know that that light is there, she says. You can't see it traveling. You can only imagine from what you've been told in your experience that the light, the illumination around that candle, around the table, around the wax, is coming from that bright spark that is, as you know, lit. That light you can see is small and tiny compared to the light it gives out and how far light spreads out, she says. And with a candle, she says, there's more than light. There is also heat. And if you put your hands near the candle, you can feel that heat. That's another form of radiation that is coming from the candle and being generated by burning. But you can't see it, but you can feel it very, very strongly. But she says also coming from that candle are other frequencies that you cannot see and that you cannot feel. And that is what she's trying to say. And she hopes that small example will give you an idea about what light and language of light is all about. It's something that's very useful to us now because for hundreds of years people use candles, I suppose, yeah? Yes, she says people use candles for light. We still use light for seeing where we are. And it's a very important part of the human experience. But light where she is does not exist. There is no light. There is merely the interpretation in our minds of what things are. And therefore we interpret things as you would interpret things without light, as if you were in the total darkness. And you see things, you see colors, you feel things, you interpret things, you receive messages, you send things out. And every soul has a unique identifier. So everyone knows who they're communicating with. Okay, that's a very beautiful description. Thank you very much for that, Titan. Okay, so Titan, thank you. You can go. I'll ask if Neil would like to come by and continue with where he left off last week. Okay. Neil, I think, is here. And Neil, maybe you could quickly tell us what you would like to discuss this week. He's saying, oh, time, oh, Father Time, he's saying. So why are you saying that, Neil? What's that about? He says he just finds it so funny how time was so important as a physical person, and particularly with him as a musician. His rhythms and his timing was everything. And now, of course, he realizes that where he is, how time is irrelevant and it doesn't exist. There is no sense of time. There is just the feeling of being freed, he says, from time constraints. He said time is actually not a very nice thing. Time indicates that things are moving towards an end. Time is a very constraining thing because people are running around trying to get things done on time. People don't want to be late. Time, he says, is actually an extremely unpleasant human construct that he no longer has to deal with. But he says the only thing that he has to do with time is when he communicates to me or other people in this realm, because that is what we understand. We cannot perceive communication except if there isn't a soundtrack of time, a sort of slow drumbeat, he says, towards the continuance of a conversation. He's saying something quite interesting. He said that as a musician, when he was playing his in live concerts, quite often he or many musicians would have in their earphones a particular rhythm, a particular sound, or a guide piece of music, or a guide. I'm trying to interpret what he's saying, like a guide track to the song that they were playing, that would help them keep that rhythm, because it was all about timing. It was all about the constraints of having to keep the song in the right time. Otherwise, it would sound like total nonsense. But he says now, where he is, because there is no sense of time, the music that is created to us would just be incomprehensible. But to him and to others, the music is the most wonderful experience, because it is so full of different times, different feelings. And he kind of understands now why, as a young musician, he was so desperately trying to understand, could there be more to music than just following the normal constructs of time and rhythm. But he says he digresses. What he wants to say now is that last week he left me at the crossroads. The right side, he said, was something that he really didn't think was going to do us any good by going along, which would be the choice that you have to make about what your life will be if you wish to take another life, and if you don't. And if you do, you can take, he says, just for example, the left-hand path, which is where we're going this afternoon. Or if you don't wish to return to Earth and you wish to have another form of experience, you can go to the right. Now, Neil, I want to ask you about that, because again, I think Linda mentioned to me, does that mean that if you choose to go down the right path at the point of reincarnation, where you can then go to other planetary systems, and it's funny, we've just been talking about starseeds and things, but if you make that choice, can you come back, and once you finish that experience, can you come back and then live an Earth life? Or can they, in that reality, come back and live an Earth life? That's what I'm trying to say. He said, yes, most definitely. And your guide Titan was mentioning it to you, that there are many, many people on Earth who have had lives in other dimensions but clearly can't remember them. And there are many people that have finished an Earth life who wish to go down this path and then pursue an experience on other realities. But he says at this point, I don't recommend that we go down this route at this point, because we're not ready for that. He says, that's why I said to you last week, I think it's something that you have to be far more advanced than just the soul that I am to really understand it, because it would be pretty meaningless. And he says, you just have to trust me on this. For now, he says, for this episode, I want to take everyone to the left, where he will just briefly describe part of what is his main purposes, which is to assist people in choosing their next life and the next body to inhabit, and how that process actually works. First, he says, you have to consciously accept life. To have got to this point, this is Neil now, to have got to this point, you've had to make a lot of decisions. You've had to decide that there are many aspects, or a few aspects, of the human experience that you need to work through again, because you either did something not quite right, or in all the evaluations that you've had over a huge extended period of time, your guides have also encouraged you to try again in a different way and see if you can learn the lessons that you didn't quite learn last time. He's saying, but we're using time again. And this is why it's so difficult. Because to you, where I'm now talking, he says, it's as if you have died, you've gone through the process, and then you choose another life. another sequential time bomb, he says. He says it's not like that, because where I am now is where I have been before, and it's where you have been before. You've done it already, and you've not done it, and you will do it. That's the only way, he says, he can describe it. It's something that is a universal, instantaneous understanding of all that happens, and all you're doing is navigating. And he says we could almost use that analogy that's been used before of shifting your frequency on a radio down or up. He says that for now, for the purpose of explanation, I want to say where we are. He says, again, you won't see anything, but I can only describe to you where we are. He says we're now, again, in what you could, for the sake of argument, call an area where huge gatherings of souls have come in order for the preparation to move into a human body. And he said it's not like a waiting room. He said it's actually more like going to a bank. He says that you go there and you talk to people or other souls, and in that bank there is a huge investment. There's a deposit of human energy which will ultimately become a child, and you will come and fuse with that. Your soul energy will come and fuse with that, and at that particular point that it happens, that transaction, if you like, is made. That promise is made. And in return, you will be born to a woman, and your soul will inhabit that child. And for many years, that your soul will have to be, he says, on the back burner, so to speak, because the human body is not ready yet. It's developing, it's not fully formed. But you're going to be instrumental in keeping a communication with the human energy of that body, and applying all the knowledge and the spiritual communication from your soul into that to help it develop. And at one point, when the child is a certain age, the fusion of you as the soul and your choices and everything that you're bringing, all the plans that you've laid for that life, will fuse with that human body, and it can never be taken apart except at death. And as you have described before, when you sleep or in an unconscious state, the soul can temporarily leave, but it never fully leaves. It's always connected. So that is where we are now, he says, and I can see the energy of different souls going into this area, and they are being fused together, and they are then, from my point of view, disappearing. I can see some energy left, but I can't see it all, because a lot of that energy now has been transferred to the earth realm, where a child is going to be born. But he's saying, again, it's so difficult to describe this in terms of what humans could understand, because although that soul now is being reincarnated into another human body, simultaneously I can see the end of that life as well as the beginning. And I can see many of the lives that the souls will have and have had. And he says, I'm only describing to you this in terms of sequential time, because it's the only way that we can understand it. He says, just to make things a little bit more complicated, he could say that his life, his past life, is something that he can see in its entirety, and he can live it again if he wishes to. He can see future lives. He can see probable lives. And in the middle of all of that, he says, he can communicate with all the different realms and all the different species and all the different dimensions that have ever existed. And it's an all-knowing, feeling, and it's such harmony and it's such peace, because there is nothing to worry about. There is no concern. There is just the enjoyment of life, the enjoyment of helping, the enjoyment of teaching, the enjoyment of existing, of the excitement of learning, he says, the thrill of new things. He says that's really where we'll leave it this week, because you've now seen the sort of full cycle of where a human soul has passed on and has gone through the, he says, the long and elaborate process of choices and learning in order to make the decisions what to do and how to reincarnate. And now we've seen the ultimate end of it, where the energy and the learned energy fuses with the strong life force energy of a new child. And once that fusion is complete, that contract is signed, if you like, and that deposit is made, the life will continue until its ultimate and decided end. Thank you, Neil. Neil actually now wants me to read the words that he's written for this week. Now, these words came through to me pretty much on Monday, and I have not looked at anything really until this morning, where I looked at the title and suddenly it came to me the title was wrong. So I renamed it. So now it's called Begin Again. I choose new life at the fork in the road. My soul's not ready to end life's short mode. Once all decisions have finally been made, all lives examined and all teachings obeyed, I can jump upwards then, but I stand on this edge. It's time to go with no bets to hedge. I've worked hard to get to this stage, examined my choices, prepared for an age. So I chose this life with potential so vast, the lessons I learned from the future and past. Combined in this new plan with others together, the merging of thoughts, feeling light as a feather. A new force merges. My soul enters life. Adventures that are new, some old, full of strife. Many with joy, sadness, or shattered dreams, everything converges to one conscious stream. It goes dark for a while as my body feels raw, the fusion of soul, the energy I pour. No longer past lives, I now live once more, forgetting past things on a brand new shore, until death takes me home again with all that I bought, gained knowledge and learning, and all that I sought. So, yeah, those are the words that Neil Peart sent through to me. And also, I think it was actually probably Friday or Thursday last week, I got a theme that was buzzing through my head. Let's see if that theme can come through to this week's channeled piano playing. And then afterwards I will send it off to Esther, and she can hopefully interpret it as proper music. Well, I hope Esther will be able to make something of that. But it sounded almost kind of Arabian Nights to me. But that was that was certainly going through my head. It was like da 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 da. I don't know. It's great fun to see how Neil's lyrics can mend with that music. And whoever's sending this music to me, I don't know, but it's really quite amazing what's happening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I can't wait till next week. And thank you very much.